Achieng lived in Mombasa, Kenya, and to everyone around her, she seemed like the perfect wife. She was always there, cooking, cleaning, supporting her husband Otieno in every way, and taking care of his son, Junior, as if he were her own. She didn't complain, not even when things got hard. She believed in family, in love, and in building a peaceful home. Every morning, she packed Otieno's lunch with care, ironed his clothes, and gave him a kiss before he left for work. She thought they were building a life together, but behind her back, something else was happening. Otieno had changed. He came home later and started ignoring her, making excuses and picking small fights. Achieng noticed, but she kept silent. She thought maybe he was stressed, maybe things would get better. What she didn't know was that while she was giving her heart to their home, Otieno was giving his attention to someone else, someone much younger. He had already started an affair, and worse, he wasn't just cheating, he was planning to leave. Achieng had no idea her world was about to fall apart. She was too busy holding it all together, too busy loving a man who had already emotionally walked out. The betrayal wasn't just in the cheating, it was in how easily he let go of everything she had given him. She was the perfect wife, but his heart had already left, and soon, so would he. It was a rainy evening in Mombasa, the kind of rain that makes everything feel heavier. Achieng was in the kitchen, warming up dinner like she always did, waiting for Otieno to come home. She heard the gate open, then the front door creak, but something felt off. He didn't call her name. No smile, no hug, just silence and wet footsteps on the floor. Otieno walked into the living room, holding a brown envelope. He didn't sit down. He didn't even take off his coat. He just looked at her with eyes that no longer held love. "I found someone who makes me feel young again," he said, his voice flat. Then he dropped the papers on the table. Divorce papers. No warning, no conversation, just like that. Achieng froze. Her hands were still wet from washing dishes. Her heart was louder than the thunder outside. She wanted to scream, to cry, to ask him why after all these years. But she didn't. She just looked at him, then at the papers. And in that moment, something inside her broke, but she didn't let it show. She quietly sat down, picked up a pen, and signed them. Not because she was weak, but because she had nothing left to prove. What Otieno didn't know was that someone else had seen it all. Junior, his 14-year-old son, was standing silently in the hallway. He had heard every word, his young eyes filled with confusion and pain. Achieng had raised him, loved him, helped with his homework, and kissed his forehead goodnight every day. And now, the man he called Dad was walking away from the only real mother figure he had known. Otieno left without looking back. No goodbye, no explanation for Junior. Just the sound of the door closing behind him, and the rain still falling outside. Achieng didn't cry that night, not in front of Junior. She covered him with a blanket and sat beside him as he pretended to sleep. Her heart was shattered, but she stayed strong for him. She knew in that moment that even though Otieno had chosen someone else, she would choose herself. And one day, that choice would change everything. After the divorce, Achieng's world went quiet. No more sounds of Otieno's keys at the door. No more laughter from family dinners. Just silence. She packed her things, just a few clothes, her small tailoring machine, and some kitchen basics. There was no big goodbye, no help from anyone. She moved into a tiny one-room apartment on the edge of town. It was small, with peeling walls, and a window that barely let in sunlight. But it was hers, and for the first time in a long while, she could breathe. Still, the pain followed her. Friends who once praised her started mocking her. She couldn't keep her man, they said behind her back. Others laughed. She's too old to start over. Even some relatives stopped calling. It felt like the whole world blamed her for something she didn't do. But Achieng didn't argue. She didn't explain herself. She just sat with the hurt, quietly. At night, when the world slept, she cried into her pillow. But every morning, she got up. With no money and no job, she turned to the only thing she had, her hand. She set up her old sewing machine near the window and started mending old clothes for neighbors. A button here, a torn hem there, just small jobs. But each stitch gave her strength. In the middle of that one-room space, surrounded by doubt and loneliness, something started to wake up inside her. A voice she had ignored for years began to whisper again. You are still here. You still matter. You still have something to give. The silence that once felt so heavy slowly became peaceful. It gave her space to think, to heal, and to dream. She no longer had a husband, a big house, or a busy life, but she had herself. And in that stillness, she began to see clearly. Maybe this fall wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something new. People had turned their backs, but Achieng was starting to turn towards something else. Purpose. She didn't have a big plan yet. No money to open a shop or start a company, but she had a needle, some thread, and a heart that refused to stay broken. That was enough, for now, because deep down she knew her story wasn't over. It was just getting started. Achieng didn't wait for the perfect moment. She had no fancy shop, no expensive fabrics, and no big team. Just her old sewing machine, her hands, and a dream she had buried for too long. She started with what she had, small pieces of fabric, a few thread colors, and a heart full of quiet determination. She went to the local market, not to shop, but to talk. She spoke to the women selling vegetables, fish, and fruits. Some were single mothers, some were struggling, just like her. She offered to sew clothes for them, simple dresses with a bit of flair, a pop of color, and a whole lot of confidence stitched in. At first, only 3 women trusted her. They gave her old keynote fabrics and asked for dresses they could wear to church or market days. Achieng poured her heart into every stitch. She made sure every dress fit perfectly, hugged in the right places, and made the women feel beautiful. She didn't just sew clothes. She gave them something to feel proud in. Word began to spread. One client told another, who told 2 more. Soon, more women started showing up at her door. They didn't just want clothes. They wanted Wema Wear. That's what she named her brand. Wema means grace in Swahili, and it was the one thing Achieng had held on to, even when life had broken her heart. She started sewing late into the night, sometimes with a candle when the power went out. Her fingers ached, but her spirit didn't. She kept going, fueled by the smiles of women who came to pick up their orders and left feeling 10 years younger. She added pockets, bold cuts, bright colors, pieces that turned heads and sparked conversations. These weren't just dresses, they were statements. By the 3rd month, she had 50 clients. 50! Her tiny room became a busy little workshop. Fabric was everywhere, on the bed, across the floor, hanging from the curtain rods. But Achieng didn't mind the mess. This was her beginning. Every dress that left her hands was another piece of her healing, another stitch in the life she was creating from scratch. She didn't have everything figured out, but she had momentum. She was building something, slowly, loudly, proudly. What once felt like the end was now starting to look like a runway. And this time, she was walking it on her own terms. It was a warm afternoon, and Achieng was busy in her small boutique. The walls were lined with colorful fabrics, finished dresses hung neatly on a rack, and the hum of her sewing machine filled the room. She was focused, pinning a bold red design on a mannequin, when the door creaked open. She looked up, expecting a client, but it wasn't a customer. It was Junior. He stood there in the doorway, taller than she remembered, his school bag slung over one shoulder, and eyes that looked tired for someone his age. Achieng froze for a moment, surprised to see him. It had been months since the divorce. She had kept her distance, not wanting to confuse him or interfere, but here he was. "Hi," he said softly, almost afraid to speak. She smiled gently. "Hi, Junior. Everything okay?" He looked down at the floor for a long second, then said, "Dad fights with her all the time." His voice cracked just a little. "He yells. She yells. I can't even do my homework in peace." Achieng's heart sank. She walked over to him, her hand still holding sewing pins, and waited. Then came the words that hit her deep. "Can I stay with you for a while?" There was no hesitation. She dropped the pins onto the nearby table and wrapped her arms around him. It wasn't a polite hug. It was full, warm, tight. She held him like a mother who had been waiting, like someone who never stopped loving him. She didn't see him as just Otieno's son. Not anymore. She didn't hug him as a stepmom trying to do the right thing. She hugged him as the only parent who had never lied to him, never left him, never made promises she didn't keep. "Of course, you can stay," she whispered into his hair. "This is your home too." From that day on, Junior became part of her little world again. He helped her in the shop, holding fabrics, organizing threads, even sweeping the floor after school. At night, they ate simple meals together and talked about life, dreams, and sometimes pain. Slowly, he started smiling more, laughing again, and Achieng's heart which had been broken and stitched back together piece by piece, grew even stronger. She didn't need a husband to feel like a family. She had Junior, he had her, and together they were building something real, something honest, something that no one could tear apart again. Achieng's small boutique was no longer just a sewing corner. It had become a little powerhouse of creativity and love. With Junior now living with her, everything changed. He was smart with phones and social media, and one day he said, "Mum, let's take pictures of your dresses and post them online." She laughed at first, not thinking much of it, but agreed to try. They cleared a small space in the boutique, hung a white sheet as a backdrop, and used his phone to take photos. Junior directed the shoots while she adjusted the dresses, smiling nervously. They posted the first few photos on Instagram with the name Wema Wear. The captions were simple, just like Achieng, made with heart, made with hope. At first, a few friends liked and shared. Then, something magical happened. People started noticing. Comments rolled in. "Where can I buy this? Do you deliver to Nairobi? I love this design." Orders started coming in through DMS. Junior helped her manage everything, tracking orders, replying to messages, and making sure deliveries were on time. He even made a little logo for Wema Wear. It was simple, but full of meaning. A thread forming the shape of a heart. The page grew fast. Nairobi fashion bloggers started tagging Wema Wear. Then came the moment that made Achieng gasp. One day, a well-known local actress posted a photo wearing one of her dresses. "Feeling powerful in Wema Wear today," she wrote. That one post changed everything. The followers doubled overnight. Orders poured in. Achieng could barely keep up. She was sewing from morning to midnight, but she didn't complain. Each order felt like a small miracle. Junior kept encouraging her, saying, "People love your work, Ma. They see your heart in it." Soon, she got invited to a small fashion show in Nairobi. It wasn't a big runway, just a community event. But to Achieng, it felt like the Oscars. She packed her best designs, ironed them perfectly, and traveled with Junior by bus. When her models walked down that runway in her bold, colorful, unapologetic pieces, people clapped. But when the final model walked out in a dress inspired by her own healing journey, a blend of broken patterns stitched into beauty, the crowd stood up, a standing ovation. Achieng didn't cry. She smiled, deeply, quietly, with the kind of pride that comes from knowing how far you've come, from being left with nothing to being celebrated for something she built with her own hands. She didn't just glow that night, she shined, and the whole world, finally, was watching. Otieno sat quietly at the back of the conference hall, scanning the room with tired eyes. He wasn't there for anything special, just tagging along with a friend to a women's business conference in Nairobi. Life hadn't been going the way he imagined. The woman he had left Achieng for was no longer in his life. Too many fights, too much drama, and nothing like the peaceful home Achieng once kept. Now he was alone, trying to act like he still had it all together. He scrolled through his phone as speakers came and went. He barely paid attention. The program said the keynote speaker was someone called Achieng, founder of Wema Wear. He didn't think twice. The name felt familiar, but his mind didn't connect the dots until he heard the applause. Loud, warm, long. He looked up, and there she was. Achieng walked onto the stage, elegant and glowing. Her dress was one of her own designs, bold patterns, strong colors, and full of confidence. The crowd was on its feet, clapping like they already knew her story, cheering like they were proud of her. And Otieno? He just sat there, frozen. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The woman he once dismissed was now being celebrated. The wife he left behind had become a leader. She wasn't broken. She wasn't bitter. She was powerful. Achieng stood at the podium and smiled at the audience. "A few years ago," she began, "I was left with nothing but a sewing machine and a broken heart. Today, I run a brand worn across the country, and I'm here to tell you it's never too late to begin again." Otieno felt his stomach twist. Every word hit him like a wave. She wasn't throwing blame. She wasn't even talking about him. But her strength, her presence, it said everything. She had outgrown him. She had taken all the pain, all the silence, all the betrayal, and turned it into something beautiful. He thought she'd fall apart without him, but instead, she rose. And now, the world clapped for her. After the speech, the crowd surrounded her. People took selfies, asked for advice, handed her business cards. Achieng laughed, hugged strangers, and smiled like a woman who had finally come home to herself. Otieno didn't say a word. He didn't approach her. He just sat there, watching the woman he once took for granted now stand tall in front of hundreds. That day, he didn't just see her success. He saw the truth. He didn't lose her. She simply outgrew him. Junior was just 14 when his world turned upside down. His dad left the house. Arguments became the norm, and the only person who made him feel safe was the woman who had no blood ties to him, Achieng. Years later, things looked completely different. Now 19, Junior walked into Wema Wear's office not as a lost boy, but as a young man full of confidence, and with a title that made him proud, head of marketing. He didn't get there through favors. He earned it. He had watched the brand grow from scratch, literally from their tiny one-room apartment with fabric hanging on the walls. He had seen his stepmom working late into the night, sewing until her fingers hurt. He had helped her package orders, answer messages, and take photos with a borrowed phone. And when Wema Wear exploded online, Junior was right there, learning and growing alongside her. Now he runs the brand's Instagram, TikTok, and even YouTube. He comes up with campaign ideas, plans photo shoots, and manages influencer collaborations. He knows how to take a fabric and turn it into a story that sells. He's not just promoting clothes, he's promoting courage, healing, and strength. And he always says, it started with watching Achieng rise when everyone thought she was finished. In a recent interview with a popular lifestyle blog, he sat on a bright orange couch, wearing a sleek Wema Wear jacket he helped to design. When they asked him about Achieng, his face lit up. "She's not just my stepmom," he said. "She's my boss. And honestly, the strongest woman I know." He spoke without hesitation. She could have given up. So many people expected her to. But instead, she turned pain into power. I saw her do it every single day. Watching her made me believe I could be more too. The interviewer asked him what it was like working with someone who helped raise him. Junior smiled. "We laugh a lot, but we also work hard. She pushes me. She doesn't let me slack just because I'm family, and I respect that. I want to earn everything here, just like she did." At the Wema Wear headquarters, you'll often find the two of them sitting side by side, her reviewing dress sketches, him editing a video for their next drop. Sometimes they argue about colors or music choices, but it always ends in laughter, or chai, or both. Junior isn't just her son by marriage anymore. He's her partner, her right-hand man, and a living reminder of how far they've both come. Together, they're building not just a brand, but a legacy. And every time someone asks him how he got here, he points to her and says, "It's because of her." Achieng never imagined her name would be in the news, unless maybe for a lost and found sewing machine. But here she was, years after the heartbreak, gracing the cover of Bold Women magazine, smiling in a powerful Wema Wear suit, eyes glowing with pride. Next to her photo were the words, "Entrepreneur of the Year." She held the magazine in her hands for a long moment, heart beating fast, tears quietly filling her eyes. Just a few years ago, she had nothing. No money, no support, no promises, just a small sewing machine and a dream she was almost too heartbroken to believe in. But she got up, she stitched, she created, she healed, one fabric at a time. Now she was being celebrated across Kenya and beyond. Africa Daily did a feature on her journey. From divorce to design empire, the headline read. The article told her full story, from the quiet betrayal to the one-room apartment to the booming Wema Wear brand that now had a growing staff, celebrity clients, and thousands of followers online. What touched people most wasn't just her success. It was her strength, her refusal to stay broken, her decision to keep showing up every single day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. In her interviews, she stayed honest. She didn't try to act perfect. She talked about crying herself to sleep some nights, about doubting herself, about wondering if anyone would ever see her again, not as a wife, not as a woman left behind, but as Achieng. And now, the world was not only seeing her, they were celebrating her. She wore her journey like her designs, bold, bright, and unapologetic. When asked about the slogan for Wema Wear, she smiled and said it came from her own healing. Left behind, but never left out. It wasn't just a catchy phrase. It was her truth. She had been abandoned, yes, but she never abandoned herself. She made space at the table, even when no one pulled out a chair for her. At the award ceremony, she stood on stage in front of hundreds of women, some clapping, some crying. She held her trophy, took a deep breath, and said, I was once told I was too old, too plain, too late. But here I am. So if you're sitting out there thinking your best days are behind you, I promise they're not. That speech was replayed all over social media. Her follower count exploded. But more than the fame, what meant the most to Achieng was the quiet messages from women she'd never met. You gave me hope. Because of you, I started again. She didn't just build a brand, she built a movement. Achieng sat in her beautiful office, surrounded by the soft hum of sewing machines, racks of colourful dresses, and framed awards on the wall. Sunlight poured through the window, lighting up the space she had built with her own 2 hands. A camera crew was there, filming a special piece on her journey. She had shared her story so many times by now, but this moment felt different, more personal, like a quiet message to the woman she used to be, and every woman still standing in that storm. The interviewer asked, "What would you say to women who feel abandoned, who feel like it's over for them?" Achieng smiled gently and looked straight into the camera. Her voice was soft, but full of fire. "If he leaves you behind," she said, "don't chase him, don't beg, don't shrink. Build something so powerful. One day, his world will need you to survive." There was a long pause, a quiet strength in the room. The crew stood still, some even holding back tears. And right then, the door opened. Junior walked in, tall, confident, smiling. "Boss!" he called out with a playful grin, holding his tablet. "The new campaign is ready." Achieng laughed, stood up, and hugged him. Not just as a stepmom, not just as a survivor, but as a woman who turned heartbreak into honor, pain into purpose. A mother, a leader, a boss. And just like that, her story came full circle. Not because she got revenge, but because she rose higher than anyone ever expected. She didn't just survive being left. She became the reason others believe they can rise too.